I mentioned in the last video how important it is that formats work together and become standards, rather than both being incompatible. But just being incompatible doesn't mean that two formats can't work with each other. All that's necessary is that one format can be translated to another. JPEGs can become PNGs, can become GIFs, can become bitmaps, even weird conversions like MP3 to MIDI exist. USB works in a very similar way for hardware. Pretty much any peripheral you would need nowadays exists with a USB plug, since, you guessed it, the universal serial bus was designed to be, well, universal between hardware. With that in mind, I figured the task of interfacing my Apple Newton with my PC would be an easy feat. Boy was I wrong. In fact, for the interest of this video, I'm going to put a little counter in the bottom of the screen to count every step of the transfer process from a modern PC to a tablet released 20 years ago. We start this story with the acquisition of my Newton. On its own, the device is pretty neat, but after the initial cool factor from the handwriting recognition and basic drawing tools wore off, it didn't have very much more to offer than a few business tools. Now, thanks to some Newton fanatics around the world, websites like UNNA exist for the sole purpose of hosting a bunch of free programs, extensions, and other files specifically for Newtons. It wasn't very hard to find a few interesting programs to try, like NewtonWorks, the productivity program, a speech package, and Sudoku. One problem. The package files need to work their way to the Newton from my PC. Now in the case of the MessagePad 2000, a little plug on the top opens up a serial connection, but unfortunately, my PC doesn't have a serial port, and the only serial adapter I have is the wrong shape. The Mac Color Classic, though, does have the right plug. Perfect. But there's still one tiny little problem. How do I get packages to my Mac? And then how do I get them onto the Newton from the Mac? One USB floppy drive later, and I can write the files to a disk. But the Mac won't read them because, guess what? Macs use a completely different file system from Windows. Add a program specifically to write HFS floppy disks though, and everything's working again. Now that the packages are on the Mac, it's time to transfer them to the Newton. Just install the Newton connection utilities and everything's good to go, except, wait, where are the files? That's right, HFS stores the file type as metadata, so you can't change it accidentally by modifying the file extension or something silly like that. Thankfully, someone else ran into that problem and made a program to fix the data, but it only runs on modern Macs. Great! Except that the moment the file gets returned to my PC to be written to the floppy, that modification will be lost in the Windows file system. Thankfully, someone else ran into that problem. Just have the file sent as a Mac binary, so that the data is preserved and Windows doesn't interfere. I did catch one break though, since the program I used to write HFS floppies could directly read and write Mac binary files to disk. Finally, the Newton software recognized the package and I could download it, all after a convenient 12-step process. At this point I wasn't sure whether to be proud that I had managed to successfully load data on the Newton, or angry that it took so many steps and transfers. In the end though, as ridiculous as the system was, it was functional, and if anything proved that there was still a way to get a modern PC to interact with an obscure device from over 2 decades ago. After a little bit of messing with the Newton software, I realized I could send images onto the Newton through the connection utilities. All that needs to be done is to load an image onto the Mac, open it up in Photoshop, reduce the file size to under the size limit, save it as the correct photo format, and send it to the Newton. Now I have an actual picture of Isaac Newton on the Apple Newton. The process can also be put in reverse, taking this gem that I drew on the Newton and bringing it to my PC, where I could add some color. In some ways, conversions are a nice way to allow for cross-compatibility between formats. Any error in translation is solely a result of the converter, and each converter is a standalone process, meaning that you can string 1, 2, or even 12 together to do something completely ridiculous, like load a photograph onto a Newton.